Welcome to the Intuitive Pool podcast. I'm your host, Giselle Gamby, and I wanted to make a special announcement at the beginning of today's podcast. Creating this podcast was never in the plan, and yet it has been so overflowing in joy and impact and profitability in many ways. And I know that some people have been thinking about podcasting themselves. This special announcement is to let you know of a podcasting program with some dear peers that I have met along my podcasting journey with John Chao and Sandra McKenna. They are facilitating a new podcasting program. They walk their talk. They're incredible leaders of this podcasting community that has created itself. And so if you're interested in having some podcasting training, please check them out. I will include their details in the show notes. For today's episode, welcome, and let's make intuition your most trusted advisor. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, beautiful listeners. It's been over a week since I have recorded an episode. Definitely over a week since I've recorded an episode. Unfortunately, I have not had my computer. It wouldn't open on Tuesday morning. It was sick. And so I took it to the Apple doctor and I had a wonderful experience there. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but I really am lost without my computer. It is so my office. At the same time, I didn't think that I was going to be recording any episodes because I don't have my computer. However, there has been a theme this week that's been very present and it needs to be recorded today. So I'm using my husband's computer and we will edit it next week somehow, some way. So welcome. This podcast episode is entitled When Grace Does the Heavy Lifting. When Grace Does the Heavy Lifting. I was reflecting on my last year and I was asking myself the question, what has really grown and been present for me over the last year? And I sat there just silently, really not in my necessarily rational mind, thinking about this. And then because I wasn't in my rational mind thinking about this, some words arrived intuitively. And I've never heard these words. Well, at least I can't remember hearing these words. And the words were, Grace has been doing the heavy lifting. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful, seemingly oxymoron. Grace and heavy lifting. Seemingly oxymoron, yet one of the truest premises that I have come to know. So let's talk about grace. What is grace? I know people have asked me this question before in coaching, and it's something that's quite difficult to explain because it's one of those experiences that you have to have, and it's through the experience that you then have an understanding of grace at an experiential level. So I still want to try and explain grace to you. I even Googled what is grace today, and it was valuable to Google what is grace. These are some words that I read that resonate with me, that define my experience. So let's give it a go. So grace is a divine favor. Grace is divine assistance. Grace is a spontaneous gift from God. Yes, you need to orientate yourself not only in the human physical realm, but also in the spiritual formless realm to allow grace consciously into your life. Now, what I've just said is a little funky in a way because there are people who are not even aware of the fact that we are also a spiritual body. In fact, that's actually who we really are in this human vessel, who experience grace. Would they define it as grace? I don't know. So it's not necessarily true that only people who are aware of the fact that we have this physical body and this spiritual body, it's not necessarily true that they're the only ones who experience grace. It's true that grace is given really without prejudice. And at the same time, I'm going to be sharing with you on this podcast episode because I want it to be valuable to you, and I want you to be able to have some anchor points. And not only to have some anchor points, but my intention is that you're going to take something from today's episode and give it a go, and give it a real go, in order to experience grace from a place of non-attachment, of course. So when I was reflecting on, the last year, really what has turned up for me is this experience that grace has been doing the heavy lifting for me. I started to get curious and look at what part did I play in for grace to do the heavy lifting. Let me speak to a few things here. So in my experience, what has supported or allowed grace to come into my life? Well, from my observation, I've had to play my part. I've had to do my part. And doing my part has consisted of the good old taking 100% personal responsibility for my life. And how it's played out in the last year, I'd say, is that I have consciously been letting go of my attachments and my habits around money, my attachments and habits around my physical body and what I feed it and how I love it. And I've been very, very aware of the energy of when an idea or an inquiry comes in, if that idea or inquiry is fueled by ego, is fueled by an idea or a sense of who I think I need to be and what I think I need to do. I've been hyper vigilant around checking in and saying, okay, am I thinking about this because I think this is something that I should do, or am I pulled to do this? This podcast, I can't tell you, it just continues to be the gift that keeps on giving, because it has been like going to the gym, except practicing, building the muscle around really being able to identify an intuitive pull, versus this is an idea that I've heard about and it would be a good thing to do, which is a totally, totally different vibration. So I've been clean, if you like. I've been clean, mainly clean, around where I've put my focus and attention and energy and action towards. So what I've put my focus, attention, energy, and action towards has been clean. It's mainly been following, if not most of the time, if not all of the time, following the intuitive pull. I don't believe that on retrospect, I don't think I've actually done anything, let's say, in my business that's come from a place of, I think I should do this, because I've caught myself out, because I know what it feels like when we're intuitively pulled. And I've got a few things playing around that have arrived in the last month around on our last retreat, which was last week for the Catalysts coaching group. There was very much a theme that arrived amongst the group, and the theme is to open up to multiple streams of joy and income, to open to multiple streams of joy and income. And there are some people in the group that are really, really good at having open to those streams, multiple streams. and we've been able to define them and name them and have a place for them. And it's inspired me. And so I've been opening, letting go of definitions that I've had of myself, letting go of resistances that I have held onto, that have closed the door on places that actually, let's call them my natural habitat. Places of service, places of leadership that are actually my natural habitat. But I've had this funky relationship in my head that has told me that I need to forget my authenticity and I need to forget how I turn up as I engage clients into coaching. I need to forget that in order to play in this area. And only during the week, I realized what an illusion that is, and that I have the ability to continue playing authentically and from a place of presence and intuition, which is how I turn up with all potential clients. I can be this in another area, and I will talk to that. Let's just say, I'll say it here. What has arrived is a recognition that I have around the joy of facilitating groups of people, teams of people. This is what I do in the Catalyst Mastermind. I had let go of the idea and closed the door firmly on facilitating for leadership teams, for teams at work, for a team of a husband and wife or partners, or a team of a family, a team of a group of dear friends. I had let that go because of that idea that I would have to turn up in a different way, which is the way that most people turn up to, in inverted commas, pitch. So I've had some freedom around that. So back to the point of the parts that I have played that I can really appreciate, that have allowed grace in my life to do the heavy lifting. So summarizing that point, I've really been aware of where ideas have been fueled from, whether they've been fueled from, I think this is a great idea, this is what people do, I should do this, whether there's been a resistance to doing something that is in my natural habitat because I have had some funky perception about who I think I need to show up as. And really only putting my focus, attention, energy, and action on the intuitive pull. So therefore, there's been quite an alignment, let's say. There's been quite an alignment in this podcast, which is an act of joy for me. It's an act of service for me. I have no attachment to what happens on this podcast. And it's also been, and I'm so grateful, so very grateful, it's also been another stream of income for me with the clients that have reached out to me thanks to having listened to the episodes and having felt a connection and having felt pulled. And I must say that each person that has felt pulled, their results are magnificent, have been magnificent if they've completed, and are magnificent as we are coaching presently. My question to you is, where has your energy, focus, attention, and action not been clean? Where has it not been clean? And where has it been really clean? In that you have been following the intuitive pull. And what has happened as a result of that? And can you see if grace has been doing the heavy lifting for you? There's a beautiful, beautiful man who I've spoken to about in a couple of previous episodes. We've just completed working together for 3 months. And he's the person that really, this multiple streams of joy and income, observing his process has enabled me to actually say those words out loud, which I was never present to before. He has 6 columns on his chalkboard. They are multiple streams of income. let me say that again, there are multiple streams of joy and income. And one of those columns has been, in an area that he's never played in before. And he has secured five clients without any marketing or advertising or putting it out there. Grace has been doing the heavy lifting for him. Grace has been doing the heavy lifting for him. So he opened up who he has defined himself as. And joy and creativity are his number one values. And so those number one values have been driving him to see what other streams of joy and income there could be. So another area that I can take responsibility for, having played my part that has allowed Grace to do the heavy lifting for me, is that I've really chosen peace as a state of being. And 2017 or 18, when I was definitely going through a period where I'd hit the ceiling of the consciousness that had created the last incredible growth stage. And I was bored and results were slowing down. And I saw that as a symptom of, okay, it's time to open up and grow again. And I took on a new coach, Daniel Batten, who I've spoken about many times and who I'm deeply grateful for. Peace has certainly been a gift, and I should say a choice that has graced my life. And I know that this state of being that is peaceful has had many consequences on me, tangible consequences on me. One of them being that my Hashimoto's underactive thyroid has reversed itself. Another consequence has been that my finances have been better than they ever have, including having a record month this year that was beyond what I could have imagined. Peace has also graced my husband with his chronic psoriatic arthritis in his knee. He was off work he's an electrician. He was off work for a good year and a half, completely debilitated with that arthritis. And so it's like he had to start again in terms of securing clients. And there have been beautiful clients that have come into his world. And not only that, we had a conversation about the fact that with his knee, that he can't be the electrician that he was and crawl through roofs and under houses. It just is not feasible. And there was an acceptance around that for both of us, and that potentially he'd be retiring his electrical work. And then Grace did the heavy lifting, and a type of work, being an electrician, came into his world through a friend of his, and it's regular work, and it doesn't have any impact on his knee. Choosing peace as a state of being, which isn't a podcast episode you can go back and have a listen to, is a very efficient, creative, and productive state of being that gives room for Grace to do the heavy lifting. Because if you think about it, if peace is not present, what's there instead? Resistance, attachment, judgment, all of those energies take up a lot of room. And also, all of those energies have us forget the power of who we are and the fact that we are this spiritual body connected to all. And we go into the illusion of thinking that what we want and what we don't want happens through effort, not productive at all. I was speaking about efficiency just yesterday, and my coach said efficiency is actually very deeply spiritual and sexy. because it offers the gift of time, right? Efficiency is deeply spiritual and sexy because it offers the gift of time. And when we allow grace to do the heavy lifting, we are gifted with time. We're gifted with time. And not only are we gifted with time, but we're gifted with even more joy, because when we see that grace does the heavy lifting, we go into this place of real appreciation, like emotionally charged appreciation. And that's a high vibration, which is only going to create more of what we would love and more of what we don't know that we love. Isn't that wonderful? And more of what we don't know that we love. If I go back to that beautiful man with his 6 columns, he had no idea about some of those columns. No idea. But he took responsibility as per what we've been talking about. And that created room. There wasn't much room in him before he decided to let go of his addictions. And he decided to make peace his state of being. And he decided to truly value that joy and creativity are his number one go-tos, and to follow the intuitive pull. When we first had our discovery call to see what was here between us, the reason that he wanted to come into coaching was because he wanted to know what his intuitive pulls were. And so they have arrived. Back to you. Where does peace not exist in your life? Where does peace exist in your life? Have a little project this week with the questions that I've asked you. Have a little project to become free if you're not already, and see what happens when you become free. Does grace arrive and do the heavy lifting for you? Have a little experiment. And equally, if you can appreciate that actually the choices you've been making have been really clean, really aligned, very much from following the intuitive pull, appreciate that. And see where grace has already done the heavy lifting. And with all your might, appreciate that. And consciously choose for grace to continue to do the heavy lifting. I enjoyed this podcast episode. I'm glad I didn't delay to record when my computer arrives back. And finally, I'll just talk about Grace doing the heavy lifting there. So my computer shut down, wouldn't turn on, took it to the Apple store. I thought it was out of warranty. It's 2 years, well, it'll be 3 years old in September this year. I managed to have the most perfect service attendant who said, I want to make your computer brand new. We're going to be replacing X, Y, and Z. It would have cost $1,700 should you have not been in warranty, but you still are. And so I will be having a brand new computer, which is bloody awesome. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Ciao, ciao. If you enjoyed this episode or previous episodes, I would so appreciate you sharing the love and letting your family, friends, and colleagues know about this podcast, because the only way that it's going to get out there is if we use word of mouth, the good old word of mouth. So I have my hands in appreciation for you, for those who have already been sharing the love. And should this part of the podcast inspire you to share amongst your network, I really appreciate you. Also, I've been saying that I am also returning to my first love, which is writing. So if you would like to receive me in your inbox every week, there is a link in the show notes where you'll be able to subscribe, and I look forward to writing to you. Have an incredible week. Thank you.